Hey everyone, and welcome to the Marvel Snap Decks of the Week. This week we are featuring 7 unique deck lists, 5 of which are going to be basically a meta snapshot as to what's going on in Marvel Snap. You're going to have a 6th list that'll be a Pool 3 exclusive deck list, and then a 7th list which will be Pool 2 exclusive for those that are just getting started in Marvel Snap. Now the first thing I need to say is that the current meta is being dominated by 3 very specific decks. We'll talk about them. And I'm also going to offer 2 kind of lower tier decks that don't have the consistency of those top tier decks, but will provide you with some counterplay if you're looking for that as well. However, it is worth noting that the current meta is revolving around 3 specific decks in terms of like cube rate and kind of win rate. And we're going to talk about those, but it's also worth noting that we do have a season pass coming soon, potential patch changes, and a hinted change to the ranked matchmaking system, which if you're watching this on Monday, could be released today or at least announced today via a blog. So please keep your eyes out for that. I will be covering that information as well. So there's a lot of changes happening in Marvel Snap all at once, and be sure to keep an eye out on the channel because I will be keeping you up to date. So subscribe if you're not subscribed, hit the like button if you haven't done that yet, and blah blah blah, all that YouTuber stuff. Regardless, let's get started with today's Decks of the Week. Today's episode of the Marvel Snap Decks of the Week is brought to you by Brilliant.org. One of the secrets to achieving your learning goals and staying sharp for a lifetime is learning a little bit every single day. Do you dream of being the next big entrepreneur? Do you have an idea that you think could change the world? Building the skills and the knowledge to get your ideas off the ground takes effort, and Brilliant.org is here to help you take steps towards your dreams. Each and every course is thoughtfully designed to help you stay focused and reach your goals fast. Their visual, hands-on approach to learning is an effective and engaging way to develop your skills and to help you build a daily habit of learning by engaging with their courses. Beautiful, interactive visualizations let you engage with the concepts being taught, reinforcing your learning. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, go to brilliant.org/Alexander Coccia or click the link in the description below. The first 200 new subscribers will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription service. One of the absolute best decks in Marvel Snap right now is without question the Shuri Zero list. Now this particular list is taking advantage of some of the latest techs that are kind of protecting Shuri players from some of the counterplay that is existing, and everyone that does not have Shuri is furious at what I'm about to say, but albeit, I gotta cover this, don't I? So anyways, let's talk about it. So basically what you got here is the addition of Cosmo. Now Cosmo's key because when you have Cosmo, it allows you to play behind Cosmo with like the Red Skull or something like that, and it protects from the Shang-Chi's that are available on the other side. You're going to play basically your Shuri on turn 4, Red Skull on turn 5, and you're going to play that Red Skull behind the Cosmo, which protects it. Because of this play pattern, you can't use Arnim Zola. Instead, you are relying on Taskmaster. Now the thing about Taskmaster is, of course, it will copy onto one of the other 2 lanes, which can be difficult to predict from a standpoint of your opponent. Also, they can't arrow into the lane with the Cosmo because obviously it's a non-reveal effect, but you have arrow yourself. So if you happen to 0 Titania or 0 Lizard Armor and Maximus another location, and you're winning that location as well, it's entirely possible that you have a 1 location with the 0 Titania Lizard lane, you have the Cosmo Red Skull lane, and turn 6 you could literally arrow and Titania or arrow in Sunspot or whatever. Usually Titania is a great turn 6 closer in conjunction with arrow. So you have some options here. It's also worth noting that a great target for Shuri is Vision because of its mobility, the ability to dodge Shang-Chi's, move into a Cosmo location if required, or move anywhere you want, and still being applicable to Taskmaster as a 14 play. Still very huge. We get really caught up about the 30 power of Red Skull, but like sometimes the 30 power is like wildly overkill, and sometimes it's Vision that just gives you what you need to actually get the win. It's also worth noting here that you have Maximus, which is great in combination with the Cosmo, but also allows you to maintain turn initiative. Now with this particular deck list, turn initiative can be tricky because of the way Shang-Chi works, because if you Taskmaster the 30 Red Skull and you have turn initiative, that Taskmaster drops first, followed by their Shang-Chi, okay? So please bear that in mind. Most certainly the best way to win cubes with this deck, as I said, the play pattern of Cosmo, Shuri, Red Skull, Taskmaster, but also you have that ability to follow up on turn 6 if you have a advantage on the board with the Arrow Titania, which is an extremely consistent and very powerful play. It should come to no surprise that Thanos remains one of the absolute best decks in the game, solidly in tier 1. Now the thing about Thanos is that yes, Thanos is a 6'11". I can see it being nerfed to a 6'9", by the way, to remain in Shang-Chi range, but but it's these damn stones that cause the problem, specifically the time stone. Let me explain why Thanos is so strong, because I think a lot of people are piloting it. Like, I'm encountering people on the ladder, they're like, I'm playing Thanos, I heard it's good, and they don't really understand what makes the deck powerful. Now, yes, you're going to have a large chance with Devil Dinosaur is a very consistent play. She-Hulk allows you to curve better. You do have the Magneto, the arrow play for the disruption. Magneto and Chavez are always big, nice pulls from something like Lockjaw, but that's not necessarily what the key thing here is. It's that the stones become free with Quinjet, which allow you to feast them into this Lockjaw. But most importantly, this Time Stone, which I've kind of mentioned to be the major problem here, allows you to get a leech out on turn 4, which completely dismantles your opponent's opportunity at counterplay. It's actually why this deck list is so good. If leech were to get nerfed, the win rate of this deck list would drop dramatically. It's leech coming out on turn 4, or leech coming out for free on Lockjaw, or leech being cycled into Lockjaw and basically pulling out a Magneto or a She-Hulk or whatever. That is the problem. It's leech that is the major kind of like pinpoint problem of this deck list if you're trying to counter it, and it's one of the major win conditions you have as a player playing Thanos. In fact, your ability to play or pull leech is basically one of the win conditions. Like, if you have Time Stone leech, you basically win the game. It's crazy how impactful that one card combination can be, especially with the Rock and the Lockjaw kind of engine cycle that you're able to generate with this list. It's a remarkably powerful list. There are still some different variations. Like, I do like the Valkyrie list, which I did take to Infinite, but this is kind of like the stock and standard list that I believe for most players will give them exactly what they need to kind of like work with Thanos and probably carry them up the ladder. Coming in at tier 2 is Galactus, and Galactus is without question a very good card in the current meta, although one that takes a lot of practice to pilot. It is the ultimate destroyer of worlds, the ultimate disruption of board states, but you know what? There is a lot of nuance to piloting this deck. Now, I know you've all been frustrated by Galactus-based decks. However, what's worth noting here is that it is going to be getting another tool in Nimrod in the next season pass, so you might see a little more Galactus than usual, but what I want to warn you of is that the play pattern does require a lot of practice. Now, there's a couple things happening with this specific deck list. Now, there's a number of different deck lists that all have different goals with Galactus. This is a very vanilla, straightforward kind of playstyle deck list that I felt kind of like really helps players that might be picking up Galactus for the first time and be experimenting for the first time. It's a solid deck list that has multiple win conditions, and it doesn't get too fancy, right? The key thing here is that you want to ramp up Galactus with the Psylocke, the Electro, or the Wave, but there's a couple different considerations. The first is you have Green Goblin and Hobgoblin. These cards are played on the location that you wish to actually play Galactus on. That means that even if you're really stuck and you're forced to play Galactus on turn 6, if you have Hobgoblin and Green Goblin in there, there's a good chance you'll be able to trade into that location with the Galactus regardless, although that's not the ideal gameplay kind of like methodology. You do have the Daredevil, which gives you counterplay against a turn 5 arrow play against your Galactus. With that being said, Kang, the new Series 5 card, can also be used to that extent as well. But Daredevil does give you counterplay against the arrow counter to Galactus when he's basically ramped out on turn 5. You also have the opportunity to play a turn 4 Dr. Octopus into a lane which you're not going to Galactus, and the hope there is that you pull a bunch of their answers that they'd want to use to counter your Galactus play, and then you destroy it on turn 5, and then on turn 6 you play a discounted death with whatever else you might need, while obviously having something like a Green Goblin in the other lane, and hopefully having your Wolverine bounce around into that location as well. I know a lot of people can get frustrated by Galactus, but it is an extremely capable deck list, and it's currently sitting solidly at tier 2. As we get into the next couple tiers, it's worth noting that I do think that the Lockjaw based Thor list from last week is still a very capable list, but I want to show you guys a couple different things because I know the meta is getting frustrating for people. Now, I do think that this Toxic Sera list is very capable, especially against Thanos. However, I do think that it'll suffer slightly against Shuri based deck list. It doesn't have a complete answer. Now, it is a very good deck list. It does have the Shang-Chi capability of kind of getting rid of that Shuri play, but if they're doing a 30 Red Skull Taskmaster, there's nothing you can do with the Wong Hazmat to fully counter that, although it does crush Thanos. It's a very capable list. However, it lacks the consistency that the tier 1 and 2 lists will have, like the Thanos, Shuri, and the Galactus list tend to be much more consistent. Specifically, the Galactus list can have higher kind of cube rates, although the win rate might be lower. With Toxic Sera, it is a very capable list. I mean, it's getting a lot of popularity across the meta right now because people are just sick of Thanos, honestly. So they want a reason or a capability to punish it, right? You do have the Cosmo counterplay. Maximus provides you with kind of the value. And then, of course, with the Zabu on turn 6 with Sera, you basically have super discounted 4 costs. They basically cost 2 like the original Zabu. So you can play 3 of them, right? You can play, basically, you can play Wong, Enchantress to counter whoever, Wong, Shang-Chi to punch out a Red Skull, and to Hazmat. So what happens is the Wong Hazmat combination really decimates their side of the board, especially when you kind of hit it with a couple rocks as well, while Luke Cage obviously protects your side as well. A key kind of counterplay here is Iceman. And you think, oh, it's Iceman. Why Iceman? It's because if you hit Shuri with Iceman, like the combos, it's much harder for them to pull. If you hit Red Skull with Iceman, if you hit any part of a combo, which tends to be a very kind of major point of the current meta right now, these Shuri combo based lists, Iceman provides you with like that immediate impact, right? So it can be very useful from that perspective. Typhoid Mary, of course, giving you that Luke Cage value. But overall, this deck list is good. It is fun. It destroys the Thanos-based list, provided you don't get hit with that Leech early on, because Leech will just dismantle your hand anyways, which is one of the reasons why Thanos tends to be so good. However, it is going to be less consistent than the decks at the top of the tier list. Coming in at tier 4, we have a Darkhawk-based Sera control list. Now, a lot has been happening with Darkhawk as people start to realize that it is a pretty good and reliable counter to Thanos. It doesn't reliably counter Shuri as effectively, because in this specific list, Arrow tries to like not really find a good place, although like you could probably squeeze Arrow in here honestly, but it doesn't have a natural fit in this deck, right? But what I am going to tell you is that it does work really well against Thanos, and just generally puts up a lot of power, because you do have your Korg, Black Widow, which is like the usual thing, prevent them from drawing from their hand, which in theory buffs up the Darkhawk. You do have the Rock Slide, but the key thing here is that with Sera and with Zabu, you kind of have that miracle turn 6 that you wanted before with the 2 cost 4 drops. So you do have the Shang-Chi where you can counter the Shuri. You do have the Enchantress for those Devil Dinosaurs and the other kind of ongoing base lists. Namely, you have the Killmonger, which will wipe out all of the stones from Thanos, and obviously the sunspots as well, and some of the other control base lists. You do have Cosmo. And what's interesting about Cosmo, you will see versions of this list that actually run Maximus, which I think is crazy. I don't have the coconuts for it, but the idea is that you run a Darkhawk list with Maximus. Now, naturally, that's counter synergy because you're drawing cards into the hand, but the idea here is on turn 6, you're playing the Maximus into the Cosmo location for the 7 power, which is significant, right? If you want more power, you could get like someone like Polaris. I do like the traditional Mystique combination with Darkhawk. With Sera, you do have that turn 6 miracle play where you can play Darkhawk Mystique together, which is really nice and might kind of take them by surprise. But this is like a less consistent deck than perhaps it used to be. It does counter the Thanos. You do have the pieces to kind of deal with Shuri. If you can squeeze Arrow in there, like do it. But like for me, Arrow seems like an awkward fit in this list, and that's probably the major downside to this. Like, where do you fit Arrow? So I do think that this list is kind of in the process of becoming more meta, and as it'll get refined over the next few weeks. And I think that Darkhawk will have a key role to play against Thanos. It's just against the Shuri, it seems a little vulnerable. For our Pool 3 exclusive deck list, I still think that Lockjaw on reveal is one of the best options right now, especially if you're someone who like sees the impact of something like a Thanos-based list, but you don't have Thanos yourself, and you want to get in on that Lockjaw action now. So what this deck list here does is it basically allows you to utilize Lockjaw to good effectiveness. You have a very greedy list, and the nice thing about it as well is Leech being as prevalent as it is, you have some counterplay against Leech, because if they Leech Giganto, that's a 6/14 you can play anywhere. If they Leech Infinite, that's a 6/20 that you can play anywhere. So this is the counterplay here. The Giganto and Infinite are the counterplay towards Leech. The other thing that you need to know here is that Chavez is always protected from Leech because it's in the deck, which allows you to pull it from the Lockjaw. However, it will be susceptible to Shang-Chi. You do have the Nightcrawler and Wasp combination. Wasp is key because you can play it into the Lockjaw on turn 3. You can turn 4 Jubilee, which is great, which allows for the rotation with the Lockjaw. You pull a card, and you pull a card with the Lockjaw rotation of Jubilee itself. Vision's a great option as well to give you some mobility to move out of the Lockjaw lane so you continuously play into it. Jane Foster allows you to pull that Wasp out of the deck, play it again into the Lockjaw. And again, She-Hulk allows you to curve a little better. You got the Mjolnir-Thor combination. Mjolnir is excellent to be playing into the Lockjaw, but the major combination here is going to be that counterplay to Leech, which I think is so valuable right now. Regardless, it is a high kind of like stakes deck. When you do pull the Dracula, it's blessed because it's more than likely to hit a big card in your hand. Like, you're going to have Chavez, you're going to have Giganto Infinite, you're going to have these massive cards sitting in your hand, and then Dracula just kind of takes away that garbage that you're not even able to play and puts significant value on the board. It's a very good list and one that you can turn to if you don't have some of the major players in the higher tiers. I've been getting a lot of messages from players in Pool 2 who are like kind of frustrated with the decks they're facing. They're facing Thanos-based decks. They're facing Galactus-based decks. And while you can't really counter all of them, you can start to counter some of them. Like this is a counter meta control list, which is kind of interesting. It does utilize Storm, Jessica Jones, and your Sunspot. It does not include armor currently, because armor is not really being played much in the top list. It's being played as an answer to some of the top lists. You do see some armor in the Shuri list, but Shuri's not really running anything that like you need to worry about in terms of countering your gameplay. You need to counter their gameplay with the Shang-Chi, right? Now, this does not include Arrow. It does not include Green Goblin, which Green Goblin's excellent against Galactus. Arrow is excellent against Galactus and against Shuri. But what it does have is some counterplay against Leech with the Infinite. It does provide you with the consistent draw pattern of Chavez. You do have the Angela Scorpion. You do have the control of Scarlet Witch. You have the ability to play kind of on tempo with the Lizard. And of course the Storm Jessica Jones combination as well. It's just one of those decks that provides you with a lot of answers to what you might be encountering as you enter Pool 2. If you're still seeing a lot of Zoo, you could very easily get rid of someone like Scarlet Witch, and you could add Killmonger instead. So this is a good kind of starting point where you can adjust based on like where you're at in Pool 2 and what kind of meta kind of decks you're facing, because the meta in Pool 2 is going to be completely different. However, I am getting reports that like Pool 2 players are seeing like Thanos lists and Galactus lists and stuff like that. So I wanted to give you guys a list that has a little more answers from a tech perspective. I don't think you need Enchantress in this list. Like Enchantress is good too, but if you're against like a Devil Dino list, you can Shang-Chi it, right? Moon Girl Devil Dinosaur becomes a little more challenging, but ultimately, like, you know, those are games that if they do get that draw, like it's hard to compete with. I do think Devil Dinosaur is also a very good list, but maybe we'll talk about that next week. Regardless, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in that next Marvel Snap video.